Good morning, afternoon, evening, MSP friends and family. Welcome to Partner First, where we bring in subject matter experts to improve your business. I'm your Wild Wednesday host, Dean Trempelas, continuing my Hawaiian shirt takeover. As a reminder, we are streaming and recording this, so it will be available on most of the platforms you like, some of the platforms you don't. Today, we'll be talking about client contracts with a focus around defining liabilities and strategies that not only minimize your risk, but also fuel business growth, featuring Trevor Thomas of ZenContract. What is up, Trevor?
How are you? Wait,
Awesome.
No one told me I had to be a subject matter expert here.
That shirt already qualifies you as a subject matter expert. That's fantastic.
I love it. I definitely thought I was going to wear a louder shirt than you. And then you never mind. I don't even know why I tried.
Well, okay, so while we're talking about that really quick, before we get into the meat and potatoes of this presentation, so obviously I'm a psycho dog dad, but so is Trevor. So Trevor, do you want to tell us about Batman and Robin?
Yeah, so we got our dog. So this is a painting that we had commissioned of them. It was relatively inexpensive too. 2014, we got Batman, and we're driving home from the rescue, and Desiree's looking at this dog sitting in her lap, right? He's like 5 months old. And he's laid back, and he's got these big old ears. And she's like, he kind of looks like a bat. Can we name him Batman? And I was like, trying to hide my excitement, like, I guess. But then I get to name the next dog. So then we got Robin in 2019, right before COVID, and that's them. They're both great. Batman is the laziest dog, and Robin is the most anxious. So they're a great mix.
I love that you have a dog painting. I'm not the only one. Ray, I'm not the only one. I have a painting of Lily up there. See, I'm normal. This is normal.
Well, I don't know if you can put us in that normal category there.
So what are we talking about today? I mean, I know what ZenContract is. It's amazing. It's awesome. I think a lot of people probably from the name can figure out that it has something to do with contracts. But you're not just here to tell us about the amazing ZenContract platform. You actually had something interesting to tell us, right?
Yeah. So contracts are not super exciting. We talked about this while we were in the green room, right? Contracts are not super exciting. You look at it and you don't think of revenue or stability in your business. You think of them as this thing that has to happen, or right. Does it even have to happen, right? And I think we can really dig into some good points based on your experience as an MSP that you were just alluding to, right? Where you're like, hey, our agreements are rock solid. To be told, hey, they're not really, right? So it depends on if you're trying to up your operational maturity, or if you're looking for an exit, or if you just want your revenue to be secure, right? Like there's so many different facets to it that I think people just kind of ignore or don't want to get into.
Well, so let me ask you about that. So when I joined my MSP mid 2000s, we had, this is not planted, I literally had this on my desk. We had a celebrity MSP lawyer. I say that half joke, and he's a good guy, Brad Gross. He had wrote our contract after we had been at like an IT Nation show. We had like at that time all those major things you'd want, like assignability in our agreements, like limited liability hold harmless, a method you could exit out of the agreement, what happens at the end of the agreement, if it goes like month to month or whatever. We would get those signed. We would upload the PDF and save it as an attachment in ConnectWise. Like I thought we were killing it, and it sounds like there's a lot of room there that we could have improved what we were doing. And I was telling Trevor before when we got acquired the first time, I was really proud of our agreements, and the MSP that acquired us, your contract management sucks. Which was like, wait, what? I was not expecting that. I thought we had our act together. So like what are some of those pitfalls? I think a lot of the folks that are listening, they've probably done those basic things, and they probably feel like I have agreements. I mean, they say agreement stuff. I have them in SharePoint or somewhere. I do occasionally remember to sit down and meet with my clients to renew them. I'm not going to like evergreen them automatically forever. Like, what am I missing?
Yeah. It's funny that you say that, a lot of people think they have their contracts in order when in my experience, and keep in mind that I've done demos to hundreds of MSPs. Normally I'll get on a call and I'll say, what does your contract process look like? And they're like, well, we don't really have one. Either we don't have one Or we have a Word document that we convert to a PDF, then we send it to our customer, they print it off, sign it, blah, blah, and like that whole rigmarole, right?
Right.
And those are the people who are actually doing contracts. I think there's this kind of grassroots movement. I've said this so many times that I feel like I'm starting a cliche by saying grassroots movement, but realistically, how do MSPs get started? A lot of them start out with, hey, I know IT. I've been working for Dell, Lenovo, or some company in their IT department for 10, 15 years. I know my stuff. I don't like working for this bigger company, and I can bring this to a bigger audience. And so you go out and you go, hey, Dean, you've got your business. I would love to manage your IT, right? And you shake on it, and then it kind of just grows like that. Dean says, hey, Simon, Ray, this guy's really good at IT. You should use him, right? And so there's this just organic growth that happens. And before you know it, you're 10 years in, you're like, what was that contract with Dean? Like, we haven't raised this for 7 years, right? And what about the limited liability for third-party vendors? Like, what if something happens, right? And that's what we try to avoid, right? We're trying to make this conversation louder because we get people who come to us and they're like, it's the same thing in the MSP space. I actually think this is a good parallel, where MSPs, they'll go out, they'll try to sell their services to someone. No, we're not interested. It's way too expensive, right? Then an incident happens and you have to go clean things up, right? Which is a nightmare, right? And I've been on the MSP side of things doing that, and it's horrible, right? It's the same thing with us. Last thing we want is people to come to us and be like, well, so we're in court because we didn't have this contract signed. Like, that happened to us. We had a company that was right on the edge and they're like, we're going to move forward. It's not super burning priority. And then 2 months later, their client came to them and said, hey, we got breached and it's your fault. You're our MSP. You're supposed to keep us safe. And the MSP said, well, this could have been prevented by MFA, and you guys declined the MFA project. And the client's like, no, we didn't. They're like, well, you signed off on it. We've got that document. Where? They didn't have it. They couldn't reference it, right? So, I mean, it's kind of this, you look at it as a cost center versus, hey, there's actually an opportunity to make money here.
Well, so one of the things I see a lot on Reddit, MSP Geek Chat, is this push, especially with some of the MSPs that have started in the last 10 years, that they're very proud of being month to month. They're very proud of the fact that they might have an MSA, and their MSA may even be on their website, but they don't really have a specific agreement because they're month to month. And it's always kind of struck me as odd that, even if I'm providing a scope of work for every ticket or engagement I do with you, which is asinine. Mm-hmm. To your point, how do I keep track of all of that? Because, if I'm in that sort of a situation where I'm month to month, maybe I don't have a formal agreement, and my client did decline MFA, and I've got an email chain maybe showing that. Mm-hmm. But how do I keep track of that, all of that stuff? I was a ConnectWise shop, so we would either put it as an attachment in ConnectWise, or when we're using Cell, it would stay in Cell. Mm-hmm. But that means I had to have access to both those things. It meant that I had to be able to find the document, however it was named. It meant that somebody had to upload it, which we could tell a story about all the times that didn't happen. But at the same time, I'm an MSP. I don't think I'm dumb. I have SharePoint. Why do I need a solution to manage this? Like, that would be my objection. I know I'm doing it wrong, but at the same time, I'm not going to buy something to do it better. Like, how do you overcome that? How do you help that newer MSP, that more modern MSP, understand the need for this?
So I like, a great analogy just came to my mind. Think about mechanics. Do you know any mechanics?
I do.
Yeah. What does their car look like? Is it crappy?
Well, some of them are. But no, my neighbor's a mechanic, and his truck is immaculate.
Okay. So the mechanics I know, and this is kind of, it'll make sense once I explain it. A lot of mechanics, they go out and they do work on these cars. They want to make sure that everything is serviced properly. They're doing oil changes, all the seals, valves, blah, blah, blah. Everything's mint, right, for their customers. But at home, they're like, whatever. If something breaks, I can fix it, right? MSPs do the same thing. Right. Okay, we want to make sure that my clients' businesses are secure. Got the new XDR, EDR, whatever the product of the week is. Make sure that they are secure, they're operational, backups are all good, right? But then internally, they're like, well, we can make do. We don't really need tools to make us better.
Right.
Right. Which is kind of, I get it. Right. But, you put things on the back burner for so long, and then eventually you're archaic, right, in your internal processes. Right. No offense, MSPs who are listening. It's just kind of the way it goes.
So, but I mean, realistically, how, obviously nobody wants to have that like, oh crap situation where their DR plan and their IR plan, or lack thereof, goes into play. Once you go to court, everybody loses. But I think most of us take that as that's the exception. That's not supposed to happen. So pretending for a minute that's not in play, how does any of this help me, for example, collect more revenue? Like, because I'm in a for-profit business. That's ultimately what I'm here for, is to make money so I can pay my staff and live a good life. How does any of what I'm doing with contract management assist me in that? Or does it not? Is this just like a utility, like the lights in the office, and I just got to pay it because it's just an operating cost?
Well, and I don't want to sit here and tout, hey, buy our product, you're going to get X% revenue. But here's some stuff that we've seen. And like, this is all based on, I've got another slide that's not in this deck, that actually breaks down the number of MSPs that we've seen with these issues, right? Now, let's just focus on human error, right? You've got a Word document that is, let's say that there's 2 or 3 people sending out this Word document that you convert to a PDF. Now, there's a couple issues here. One is you could be leaving old customer data on it that's saved, right? So, we did a find and replace, and we screwed up. We left, Dean's name in there instead of changing it to Simon, right? So there's one thing, and that's just a reputational thing. The other part is putting out losing contracts. So Greg Sharp, he's the founder and CEO of ZenContract. He saw this time and again where a salesperson, me, I want to close this deal. I'm just going to, shave off one of these zeros. And now I've sent out a contract that's for a year, 2 years, 3 years. That's actually a losing contract. Right. And, what do? Do you go back to your potential customer and say, hey, we're not making the margins we wanted on this? Right. Or do you just eat it? You probably just eat it in the hopes that you can recoup it in some way. Right. The lost contracts we can harp on forever, but you've got SharePoint. Do you have it set up properly so it's actually pushing in there? Maybe, unlikely, like the number of people and
somebody's clicking and dragging.
Yeah. And if they're doing that, right, the number of, I was dealing with an MSP, they've got 300 employees. And I said, okay, how do you store your contracts for referenceability, right? Like, are they logically filed? And further to your point, the naming convention, right? They have to be named appropriately. And they're like, well, not well, like this sales team does everything locally, so they store them on their computer. I'm like, okay, well, what if they leave? Like, how do you recoup those? Well, our account management, they put them into the SharePoint folder, but they don't name them properly. And they actually just put them into this SharePoint site, not necessarily a folder, right? And it's like, okay. And then how does like finance store their side of the content? Like everyone's doing something different. And that's a better one than, oh, we just blind fire an email with a PDF and hope that it comes back and then it sits in the email, right? Like chaos. So you're not off the hop. You're not going to make more money, but you're going to avoid losing revenue, certainly, right? And then, on the side of, okay, we go month to month, or we're month to month from the get-go. I have thoughts on that. And actually, I want your thoughts on this first, because my thoughts are, yes, it's nice to be month to month, right? Because you're only as good as your last month, right? It's a sales mantra, right? You're only as good as your last month. What have you done for me lately, right? But there's so many costs, I feel, associated with MSPs and getting people set up, and the overhead and the initial onboarding, that if you're not charging for that, how do you recoup that, right? And for me, termed contract seems like the right way, but I'm curious on your thoughts.
Well, the first thing you had talked about a naming scheme. I just think it's a fun tidbit. OIT was the first tech company I've ever worked at that had a defined policy for how all contracts get named and labeled. And it's such a trivial thing, but it makes it so much easier just having one rule for it. But that's how uncommon that is. But so going to your question. So what I found at my last MSP is as we grew and we got to the point where we were interested in being acquired for a really big valuation, and then we got into acquiring, month to month contracts are not particularly attractive from an acquisition standpoint in most cases. And I think that's the biggest thing that I always stumble with when I'm trying to give feedback to people on like Reddit about this, is there's this like overarching concept, especially with these like more nimble, it's a nice way of saying it, MSPs, where they feel like month to month is good customer service. It's sort of the 2020s version of selling a refurbished computer to your client. It's sort of like the contract version of selling out of your own pocket, because you think you're delivering this great customer experience by not locking them into a long-term agreement. But besides the fact that you're not protecting your investment at all, if you do want to sell your business, there's nothing there. No one cares. I mean, I'm buying a bunch of jobs at that point and a warm book of business. So I've always been a bigger fan of actually having termed agreements, especially because our MSP was really, really big into hardware as a service. And so I needed that. I needed a 3-year minimum term agreement to protect myself in that HOS agreement. And it creates a stickier relationship, and not stickier in like a toxic way, but you genuinely are entering into a partnership at that point. And so all the other MSP stuff you want to do, that trusted business advisor concept, there's more skin in the game now for the clients as well to want to invest in that relationship. So that's my opinion. I mean, there's plenty of month-to-month MSPs that are widely successful. I just don't think that's probably the best long-term approach, especially if you're looking to get a good valuation on your company someday.
Yeah, definitely on the valuation side of things. I've got a slide with some stats. Everyone likes looking at numbers, right? But these are stats that we've pulled from Channel E. I think that slide is a little bit off, but M&As are up. And so let me give you a bit of like color on where ZenContract came from. So Greg, when they were looking to up their operational maturity, right? And when you're looking at that, where did he start? Possibly in your revenue, right? And then you kind of look deeper into your contract. And they found internally that there was 30% of their revenue that wasn't on contract. Now, further to your point of like exiting the company, they used ZenContract to have total visibility on all of their revenue, make sure it was all on contract, and ended up getting a 10 times EBIT exit, which was unheard of for an MSP, right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Right. So, I mean, that's one part of it. The other part of it is, I think there's this misconception that people are afraid of contracts, right? It's a scary word. It's, now I'm locked in. But I think there's some, a lot of solace in the sense that, okay, now Dean and I are on the exact same page, right? I know how long I'm in this for. I know that, year one, it can go up X% per year. I know the exit clauses. I know, the third party liability. We're both on the same page, right? It's clear and concise for both of us. So if there is a CYA event, I know exactly what's going to happen there. Right. And totally. Alexandria, just to answer your question, we do white glove onboarding. So we do the heavy lift for a minute.
We love white glove onboarding here at OIT. So
it's the way to do it, right?
It
Especially
really
with with all the complexities that come from a PSA and internal business processes. Having someone say, "What do you want this to look like?" Okay, I'm going to connect all the dots for you, and now you've got this out of the box thing that's great.
So I have a question on that, not to derail entirely. So once again, I swear this wasn't staged. I've got, I don't know if you know Bruce McCullough from Galactic Scan. So I've got his book as well that I've been trying to get through. This is a tough read. But years ago, we had decided that we wanted to get into policy management at MSP. So we had wanted to get into, first of all, HIPAA, and then we wanted to start getting into compliance policies. And the challenge that we ran into with that was, okay, so we have these MSAs and we have these scope of works. We had finally gotten to that point. We had an MSA and a scope of work. How do I keep all my policy documentation in one place? How do I link the policy documentation to the contract? And that was our big disconnect. And at that time, we were using a tool from They That Shall Not Be Named to manage that for us. And it was okay. And we had brought in Bruce and Galactic Scan, right when they had first come onto the scene. And his advice was like, you're doing all of this wrong. Like, you've got all these independent policy documents. They're not at all tied into your MSA. Your MSA isn't indicating which of these you would use. Like, the whole thing was a hot mess. And we kind of gave up. And I'm just curious if either officially at ZenContract or unofficially, just as experts in this, do you guys have a better way or a solution or a path?
Yeah. You kind of queued that up perfectly. So there's two ways to look at this, right? So Dean's my customer. I want you to sign off on my internal policy saying, if you're going to call our help desk, here's how you do that, right? So this is when we look at the contract management kind of thing.
I swear I didn't look at the slide deck ahead of time. I didn't realize you had a slide for this.
I have a slide for everything, man.
That's awesome.
So hey, I was like, did you actually not look at the slide deck? Like, you cute.
I really didn't. I had no idea.
So
that was going to be a gotcha question. I was hoping you'd be like, nah, dog, we got nothing for that. And I was like,
No, you're going to ask a gotcha question. I'm just going to go deer in the headlights. But on this one, I think I've got it covered. So we just launched, it's actually a sell-through product, right? So like I said, there's two ways to look at it. You say, hey, Dean, you're my customer. I want you to sign off on my policies. But Dean, to his employees, might also have policies, right? IT fair use, bring your own device, MDM, et cetera, et cetera. So we launched a portal where you can go in and you can go, okay, so Dean's company, here's a policy score, right? Here's how many policies they have. And you can click in and go, okay, IT fair use of your 10 employees, five have signed it, 3 have looked at it, 2 haven't even looked at it. And then you can go version control on each of them too, right? So you can say, hey, Dean, your employee Trevor's a slacker and he hasn't signed off on any of these policies, and report back to them. Now it's a sell-through product, right? It's quite inexpensive to the MSPs. And Greg was doing this like back in the day, except for very manually, right? So if you think of trying to send out, again, let's go with the Word document converted to a PDF out to 100 employees, then get the signature, and then let's go back to the storage thing, right? It's a bit of a nightmare. So now we have a centralized platform that you can do that for. So yes, it is the answer to both your questions.
So let me ask you a question then. So I think the average MSP that's probably watching this likely doesn't have a dedicated HR professional. They likely don't have a dedicated CFO. I mean, maybe they have a comptroller at most.
Yeah.
So the admin team is probably the owner, someone doing limited financial, and some sort of office administrator person at best.
Yeah.
Is this for them? Is this solution for that kind of setup?
Yeah, I think so. And let's go back to keeping your, not just your clients, but your clients' employees on the same page. You can go into our marketplace. I think we have 21 or 22 different policies in there right now. And full caveat, we are not lawyers, right? We have pre-designed templates, right? Use them at your will. But, if you're ever concerned about anything legal, talk to your Brad Grosses or your other MSP lawyers, right? But you can grab a template, plug in your customer, so Dean's company, and it auto-populates all the employees in there, and you can send it out in like 2 minutes. I did a video of the entire walkthrough.
So I can use this as a service too for my clients.
You bet.
That's awesome. So what have you seen people brand that as, and how are they monetizing that? Because I love, Alex is on this in the chat. She'll tell you, I love add-on revenue. I'm the biggest fan in the world of add-on revenue, especially to use it to drive pain into the stuff I'd rather sell. So how do I monetize this?
Yeah, so like you would do anything else, it's IT policy management as a service, right? So we charge based on tenants. So Alexandria, we've got multi-tenancy with like an overall view of all the customers you've added in there. Yeah, 2 minutes. So it's, a nice overview. As far as monetizing it, it really depends on what your billing model is, right? Are you going to do it as an extra $1 or $2 per user, right? And it's going to break down to our cost, which I don't know if I should, is it just MSPs in here? The only reason I'm asking is we did a webinar and someone's like, well, you shouldn't, if it's sell-through products, you shouldn't tell your price to people who aren't MSPs.
Any MSPs in here that can't communicate their own value and are worried about their customers seeing their pricing, need a separate tutorial.
Okay, perfect. So we charge $25 per tenant, and we suggest a resale of 100. That being said, I know that Greg had some customers that he was charging like $500 a month, right? That's going to go down to like number of users, I think, right? So it depends on your pricing model. Hey, we've got this new policy management. Make sure that your employees are signing all of the password policies, etc. It's $100 a month. Like that's our MSRP on it. But if you've got 500 employees at one of your clients, then maybe you do a buck per, right? And really cash in on it.
So this is awesome. I love the ability to sell this through to the clients. I assume it's brandable.
Yeah.
So I can
white label. Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of a side question. I have an MSP friend that does this, and I've heard a few other people talking about doing this. They have fully leaned into their verticals to start selling operations as a service within their vertical. So I got a buddy's got a legal law firm, and he went and bought a legal administrative company, and now code sells that alongside his MSP services. This sounds like this is a toe in the water for an MSP to start doing that, to get a little bit more sticky in the operations of their clients. Because if I'm coming in and I'm supporting your technology stack, that's fine. I mean, that's been a thing now for 30 years. But now I'm coming in and I'm supporting your internal documentation policy management beyond just setting up a SharePoint for you. I'm actually helping you manage the compliance and engagement of these internal policies. It's starting to sound like that's almost a different business model, but it's kind of cool. Are you seeing a wide adoption of this? I mean, are people like really successful with this, or is it they buy it for the one client that needs it and then they never do anymore?
No, it's kind of roll it out to all of your customers, right? We launched it, I want to say like a month to the day ago, right? And we've seen pretty good adoption of it so far. The buzz before we even launched it was crazy. We had hundreds of people signing up for the wait list, right? And we launched the wait list, I think at the beginning of October, but we did, I think it was early June, with an MSP contract maturity quiz. And the last question on that quiz was, are you interested in policy management as a service? I think it was 98% of people who went through this quiz were like, yeah, I'm interested in it. So they went on to the wait list too. So the adoption is just growing. But now you're not looking at ZenContract as a cost center. Now it is generating ROI.
Right. All right. So I've got an MSP. I'm sold on the idea of the contract management. I don't care about policy management. I don't care about that. I flippantly told Ray before here at OIT, I don't care about desk phones. That's boring. No one cares about that. I'm really into other stuff. So I'm that guy. But my clients are all in a position now where their cyber insurance providers are coming and asking them if they do things. Are you doing MFA across all your software stack? Do you have a backup solution? Can I use this policy management tool to help me stay organized so that when I get a client that hits me, randomly now this time of year, and they're like, Tokyo Marine wants to renew my policy and I need you to fill it out and you've got 5 days, or I don't have cyber insurance. Is this a potential, maybe not solution, but way to help me do that? Can I manage that stuff in here?
Yeah, I think so. And I think you could look at it twofold. And I keep bouncing back and forth between the policy side of things and the contract side of things. But, on the ZenContract side, you could send out a document to each of your clients, and it could be a simple yes, no. Modal pops up. Do you have this? Do you have this? Do you have this? They just type in yes or no, right? And then you've got it logged under that company. And then further to that, are you doing password policies, right? Because a cyber insurance company is probably going to want you to say all of my employees have read, acknowledged, and are adhering to some sort of password policy, right? They're not using password 123 and they're changing it every 90 days. So they're using Keeper, etc., right? So now you have visibility on that tenant for that entire customer, right? So if the insurance comes along and I don't know if this use case is going to be proven or not, but certainly you could say, hey, we do have all that documentation, right? I don't know if it's going to be a screenshot from within Zen policy, or if it's just going, hey, we have all of these and we can actually refer to all of them.
So does the platform provide a secure way to send those policies, either part of it, the contract part or the policy management part, a way to send that stuff to a third party? Like if if I want to send my contract or my policy documentation to the insurance agent, or I don't know, to the judge because my MSP is getting sued, do you guys have a secure way for me to send that, or do I still need like a secure document tool?
Yeah. So I mean, we have the ability to put it into a SharePoint folder. So there's that. Certainly, it lives in the tool. Then it also pushes back from the PSA, and then there's an email copy of it. So intentionally redundant, so you're not in 2 years going, where's that contract? But aside from that, not really. I see where you're going with this, and that's actually kind of interesting, right?
So where do the documents live? Do they live on your server, my server, my secretary's hard drive, my desk, and like where is the best intended use case? If I'm using your product properly, where does all this documentation actually live?
Let's go back to what's your internal workflow, right? Because we can push it into SharePoint. So if you're using a document set on SharePoint, and that's kind of your go-to, then that's how you're going to use it. Okay. If you're using more like, you have manage and you like it at the company levels and attachment, that's where it's going to live. Or if you've got maybe an admin or super user of ZenContract, it lives there, right? So intentionally redundant, and it's at this level, so you can change the permissions for manage or auto task, and for SharePoint. Now only the people who need to see those contracts, right? And that goes a little bit deeper into like contractor agreements, employment agreements, NDAs, that kind of stuff.
So what are you guys doing? I'm asking this question at a high level. What are you guys doing to keep that secure? Because to do some of the things like integrate with my SharePoint, there's a certain amount of access ZenContract would have to have. And not that at least in my opinion, not that I feel like my MSA is a secret document. So I'm not worried about that, but more the fact that yet another vendor has the ability to read and write to my environment. What steps, if any, have you guys taken to make sure that I won't be angrily shaking my fist, curse you, ZenContract, why?
I mean, we do minimum permission levels based on what needs to happen, right? I mean, a good example of that is the API members for manage, right? We have read write on a couple things, but not on everything, right? And that's mostly on the opportunity side and the agreement side, because we do have the ability to automatically create an agreement, right? So we need that permission to do that. Further to that, every account you can set up SSO, MFA, right? So we're doing all the industry standard stuff.
All right. You mentioned ConnectWise. That's my favorite PSA. I don't know if it's supposed to have a favorite. That's my favorite PSA. So I'm most experienced with that. How does the integration live within Manage? Is it a pod? Is it like a separate screen? Do I actually have to leave the PSA? So like, for example, is it like Cell where I'm in the platform, but I technically have to leave the PSA to go into Cell?
Yeah. So our solution is web hosted. It's independent, right? Okay. It's just pushing and pulling information back and forth. There was a conversation about, because I know what you're talking about, like the pod, the screen that lives within ConnectWise. I know that is possible and that we've looked into it a little bit, but realistically, we just wanted to get, through the certified managed partner portion of it before IT Nation. So it'll be something that we look at in 24, I'm sure.
What, I don't need a whole exhaustive list, but you guys integrate with all the really hip, common, major platforms right now. So I would assume ConnectWise, I would assume Autotask, Halo.
I think Halo is next.
Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, like I'm a sales guy, right? At the end of the day, would I love it to be integrated with literally everything? Yeah. But realistically, we have to go where the market dictates.
No,
right?
I get that. All right.
Yeah, right. And Autotask was first because Greg sat on the board for Datto down in APAC, and then ConnectWise is just huge. So it made sense.
If I'm using a PSA that there's not an integration for, that doesn't mean I can't use ZenContract though, right? It just means there's no integration.
Yeah, you can CSV bulk upload all of your customers, right? And then the rest of the process is essentially the same. You go in, create a new contract. I want to select Dean, pulls Dean's information up. I want to use, our statement of work. You can have your pricing built into ZenContract. So of course, this isn't going to sync because there's no integration, but it can still live in there as far as a workflow is concerned. You can say, okay, Dean's company, I'm going to send him, the best package for 10 users at this price. Send it out, get signature. It's still stored logically, right? Still SharePoint integration.
I'm going to ask Phil to pull something up. So, we talked a little bit earlier in the call about month-to-month contracts, and I felt a certain way about that.
Yes.
I also feel a certain way about pricing being available on a website without me having to get on a call with you. And I was very pleasantly surprised to see that your website has all the pricing listed. There's no gate, there's no barrier. What went into that decision? Why did you guys decide to just publish your pricing to the point where it seems like I probably could buy it without even talking to you?
You literally can.
I want to know why.
Well, it's a good question. I think that would be more. That's a pre-Trevor conversation, but I actually really appreciate it from a sales aspect, right? And I know on the MSP side of things that you probably never would do this, right? Because you're trying to sell all of this value and make non-technical people understand what you do, right? Because you could say, hey, it's $50 per user, 180 or $250 per user, and they're like, okay, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Whereas with us, it's pretty logical pricing based on the features you're getting, right? And it also, again, going back to the sales aspect, it's very nice that people come to us and they already know the pricing. They're qualifying themselves out if they don't want to pay that, right?
So I'm curious. There's some questions in the audience I want to get to in a sec, but I actually feel that our industry needs to move towards MSPs being comfortable putting pricing on the website. And ultimately, like, I just tried it. I clicked buy on the $99 plan, and immediately I got the Stripe website to put my payment info in and click subscribe. That's freaking awesome. And because it's Stripe, my default credit card and everything is already saved in there. So to me, I feel like this is really smart. And you had made a comment that as a salesperson, you really like this. So why is this? Because plenty of MSPs have salespeople that I don't think understand why they should like this concept. Why do you like this as a salesperson? Just easy click to buy.
It reduces friction and it gets the sales cycle going faster, right? And that's not to say, like, there are, I would say 90% of people will go to our pricing page and then we'll book a demo and then we talk about it and make sure it's the right fit, right? But those other 10% of people, if they can just move forward without me talking to them, that's seamless. Why wouldn't
Do you
we want
think?
that?
Do you think more people book those demos because the pricing's available and they could just buy it without having to talk to you?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I've never gotten onto a call where someone's floored by the pricing, right? Because it is public.
Yeah.
Right. So, and again, like it's just easy sales. If we can have more sales with less people intervention, then why wouldn't we do that? Right.
I mean, it's a common complaint I see with people complain about their vendors that they, when you see these posts, you're like, what's your dream vendor? I don't want to have to talk to someone to buy a product. But yet MSPs won't do that themselves. They're so hung up on this idea that I got to explain my secret sauce. And you're sitting there and you're like, dude, it's tomato sauce. I get that your tomatoes are special and you bought them from or grew them from a very special farm, but they're tomatoes. He's using tomatoes. They're using tomatoes. Everyone's using tomatoes mashed up in a sauce. Like, what's the secret? I love this. I think our space needs more vendors and MSPs that are willing to put some level of pricing on their website with the ability for me to click a button specifically for that reason, that I feel like there's some trust that builds, that you're saying, this is what we offer, this is what it costs, talk to me. I don't know. I really like that. So sorry to derail the convo, but I was very impressed.
No, that's all good. I'm glad you like it. I'm glad you noticed the Stripe thing. I built that out like 9 months ago, and I love it. Right.
Anything that makes it easy for someone to give you money means that they're more likely in that moment to make a decision. And I hate to compare this to retail store logic, but that's how you go to a grocery store. It's how a grocery store is laid out with end caps and the registers, is to get you to, at the last moment, go, I have the money, I do want Oreos, and put them in your cart and buy them. Because if they put any delay between those things, you're going to question that purchase. And then it's much easier to talk someone into what they've agreed to buy from you after they've done that. So I think it's really smart. Alex in the audience had a question here. I think it's a great question. So I'm sold. I want to get ZenContract. I'm going to sign up. Which of these plans for sort of your average MSP of medium maturity, so somewhere between 8 to 30 employees, what's the best plan, and what are your top 3 tips for how to get
Okay.
the most out of the platform?
So I guess the plan would depend on how you're doing your renewals. If you're doing termed contracts, which I think you and I are in alignment on that you should be, then the top tier plan, that's the way to go because it's got a renewals dashboard, right? So if we look at the top 3 tips, one would be go through onboarding with Brandy Latimer. She is one of the best customer success managers I've seen. And that's the white glove onboarding. It really does, okay, what is your process, right? Because your process workflow can be very complicated. And we can mimic a lot of that to ensure there's the right safeguards in place, pricing's coming through properly. What happens after it's signed happens properly, right? So give onboarding, all you got. So that's one. 2 is, I don't know if this is necessarily just our solution, but I know Greg suggests this all the time, is separating your MSA from your statement of work, service schedule, or whatever you want to call it, because that reduces friction as far as the sales cycle is concerned. If someone redlines your MSA the first time and you go to sell them, the new XDR tool, they're going to redline it again. It's going to slow down that sales process. And the third tip I would say is use the renewals dashboard. You're leaving money on the table. If you're month to month, unless you've got built-in increases, use the renewals dashboard. Go in there and say, okay, this is coming up for renewal within the next 90 days. We're going to go in there, pull through the historical pricing, do a price increase on all the line items, send it out for signature, rinse and repeat.
I got a couple follow-up questions. So, by the way, Brandy's awesome. I know Brandy from plenty of shows. So I'm onboarding. I've got Brandy. She's doing my white glove onboarding. What's the typical onboarding length look like from when someone clicks go to when you guys agree they are good to go? Like they have been onboarded. How long is that typically?
Yeah, so like we've got a 4-week money back period, right? And that's kind of feel it out. We're going to go through onboarding. If you love it, you're going to move forward, which I think is like 99% of people. Or you're like, hey, this isn't for me. It doesn't match my workflows, right? So 4 weeks is typically what we say to get onboarded. That being said, I know Brandy onboarded one person in a day, right? They had a very simple contract, right? But it depends, right? Let's go back to the workflow side of things. Is your contract very complex? Is there a lot of branding? Is there going to be a lot of, that modal pops up where you have to type in answers? Is there a lot of those fields? How many times do you have, different system prompts that are pulling in company name and these types of things, right? So the complexity really drives that. I've never seen it go longer than 4 weeks. And before, Brandy, before you start messaging me on Teams, I've never seen it go beyond 4 weeks where they're, where our prospects, customers are actively engaging, right? And it's, this is, I think, true for MSPs too. Yeah, we can get someone up and running in 2 weeks, but if they don't answer the phone for a month, well, it's not going to happen in 2 weeks.
Same deal here. Our onboardings can be pretty quick. It largely depends on partner engagement, their own schedule, what they have on their plate. Exactly. Like a 4-week period sounds totally reasonable, and the fact that you have plenty of people that do it in way less than that is exactly what I would expect from Brandy.
And I also want to note that it's like the initial meeting is between 30 and 60 minutes, and then we do the heavy lift, right? We say, okay, you've given us your documents, we've built out your integration for you. Here is something. Here's the first draft of one of your documents. Does this look good? Look and feel, workflows, good? Okay, now we're going to build everything else up too.
So I have a question on the renewals. You mentioned the renewals dashboard, how important that is. One of the objections I see, and you probably know this as an actual salesperson, many MSP owners are the de facto salespeople in their orgs, but they're not very good at it. Sorry, MSP owners. And so what I see as a common issue, they're aware of the renewal date approaching, but they don't want to have the conversation because they're afraid to shake the tree. Because they're afraid if they go back, and let's say the contract goes month to month at the end of the let's say it's a 2-year term, goes month to month. They're afraid to go talk to the client because if they do, the client might say no, and that revenue does pay the bills. So, as literally a professional seller of a renewal platform, how do you help that owner overcome that fear and that objection? What's your like pro tip for getting over that?
I mean, I think this is not just a renewals conversation, but an MSP sales in general, right? I'm not a salesperson. I'm a technical person. I can't have these conversations. I'm going to call BS on that because all of these MSP owners have come out here and they said, hey, I provide a valuable service. That's why you got into this, right? So kind of having that inflection point of being like, no, I provide something that's really good. And it's a confidence thing. I don't know how to tell you to overcome that, aside from you actually are keeping these businesses up and running, like legitimately. So remember that when you go to these conversations.
Should they ask for more money when
100%.
they're sitting down and doing a renewal? Yeah.
100. What I guess that can't be a blanket statement. Are their costs going up? Almost certainly. So yes, I think is the majority of the time going to be the answer. But it's got to be a conversation, right? You got to evaluate the needs of your customers so that you are on the same page, right? And you're providing them with something that is actually benefiting their business.
This is a leading question because I was an operations manager previously. But when's the right time to assess if you should go up on the renewal? Is it like 2 weeks or a week or the day of the renewal? Like when should I be doing that math to know that my costs are going up?
I mean, constantly.
That was the
right?
answer I was looking for.
Right? You should be tracking your P&L all of the time, right? And most of these PSAs, if they're configured properly, then you can track that on a customer by customer basis. Greg talks about your burn rate, right? How much are you actually spending? So we're charging, let's just say it's one user, $200, and our profit's 150. Well, is it? Because there's tech time involved. You got to track all of these different metrics to figure out what you're actually making on each customer. And I'm preaching to the choir.
So we got a couple minutes left, and I like to ask every vendor we have on here this question. There are other solutions in the space, and say in a not just MSP space, that do this, or do a piece of this, or are perceived to do this. Why do I pick you instead of other option?
Two reasons. One, we are full contract lifecycle management, meaning the day you send out your MSA and your proposal separately, all the way to renewal with the integration with the PSA, so you can make sure you're charging the right amount and get your costs. So that's one reason. The other reason is the policy management. It is an easy sell-through product with good margin. And you get to talk to me. Oh, and Brandy. Yeah, Brandy's number one.
And onboarding, white glove onboarding.
Yeah. And white glove onboarding. Yeah. And we come from the MSP space, right? Greg ran MSPs for 25, 30 years. I always say 30, but then I feel like I'm aging him. And I know he's listening to this. I'm going to get an angry Teams message right now.
Well, it's been really awesome having you today. I thought this was an exciting conversation about, we were saying in the green room before that contracts are boring. I thought this was actually pretty interesting. So, I appreciate you letting me take you off script and you humoring my questions. Any final thoughts?
I love your shirt, man. I got to get one of Batman.
I love your shirt. My internet persona on everything is Dr. Zoidberg. So most people know, even on my LinkedIn, I have Internet Lobster. And here you are wearing the lobster shirt. And I'm from Massachusetts, which if you're eating lobster on eastern half of North America, it's probably coming from here or Maine. And I do not have an amazing lobster shirt. I'm very jealous.
I also have a lobster t-shirt, lobster shorts, and I was going to wear a very bright shirt that is pixelated, but I thought there was a chance that Simon was going to throw up the breakdancing video of me from IT Nation where I was wearing it, so I didn't want to wear the same shirt.
There's a breakdancing video from IT Nation?
I will send it to you.
That's amazing. That's everybody. If you need any reason to book a demo with Trevor, he will do a breakdancing lesson for you live on the demo. And if you sign for ZenContract, he'll then give you an additional 15-minute private breakdancing lesson. And that's a one-time deal you can only get if you saw this webinar.
Deal.
Awesome.
Dean.
Well, it's been great talking to you. I really enjoyed this. I love your sense of fashion. I love that you're a crazy dog dad. We should totally do this again sometime.
You bet. Anytime I get to spend time with anyone over there, it's a good time.
All right. Well, thanks for being here. Phil, you got any last minute stuff? Or are we good to go?
Sure, we got a few events that have already been happening this week. Actually, it's worth announcing Wins and Losses is taking a little hiatus, and it'll be back in the new year. We had a new episode of AI Roundup this morning. Go check that out. And then, of course, you just watched OITVOIP partner first webinar. It was amazing. If you're just now tuning in, you can go back and you can watch the whole thing.
Thanks, everybody. It was fun. I was complaining to Trevor that I got snow here, and he's in Canada.
And it's not snowing here.
Very lucky. All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
This has been a broadcast of the MSP Media Network.